Okay, hello again, everybody. Matthew Stelzner here again as we continue our journey around the solar system and now coming back to home to our own moon and the meaning of the moon, the archetype of the moon. Um, the moon has a lot to do with that which is more personal and vulnerable. It has to do with our emotional lives, the young part of us, the emotionally needy part of us. It is the mother-child relationship. And so it's the inner mother, the inner child, the outer mother. If you have children, it has something to do with your relationship with your own outer children. And it'll say a lot about our childhood generally, the experience of our youth, the period up through the 20s as I see it. The moon has a lot to do with things that are present, of course, through our whole life, our emotional needs that are there our whole life. But the moon is particularly and specially related to childhood in our younger years. It is the symbol for major female figures, as the sun, which I neglected to say, is the symbol for major male figures. It, of course, isn't exclusively male, the sun, and the moon is not exclusively female. The sun has to do with solar shining charisma, and of course a woman can embody that, and the moon has to do with emotional vulnerability, and of course a man can embody that. The moon has to do with our capacity to be caring, and of course many men are very caring, and yet there is a special way in which the moon relates to major female figures, the mother of course, but also all family members, siblings, extended family. Even the father is symbolized by the moon in the sense that the moon is the family matrix. And it's our impulse to create a family matrix in our adult lives. The need to have, whether it's our biological family or what I would call more our soul family, our tribe, where we create that container within which we feel cared for and nurtured and at home. And so the whole question of home and homeland is very relevant to the moon archetype. And one question to ask yourself in order to have a sense for how well you have the moon radio dial tuned is to ask the question, do I feel at home? Do I have a strong sense of home and community in my life? This has been a journey for myself of many years of trying to figure out where I feel at home in the world. And for me, it's here in San Francisco, California. It's California more generally. I feel at home here. I feel connected to this place, to these people. This is my home. And each of us need to be able to find that place that is home. Ultimately, home is a place within our own psyche. Do we feel at home within ourselves? When we feel at home within ourselves, we tend to have a sense of home outside of ourselves. And when we don't feel at home within ourselves, we tend to be on a quest externally to resolve that inner problem with an outer solution. And that tends to not be successful. And so it's always inner work to find that place of home. And so the moon has to do with these things. The moon has a lot to do with our emotional lives and being attuned to the feelings and to the body, where the sun is more like the solar light of day consciousness of the head, the illumination of the intellect, in a sense. The moon is more the feelings and the body. And so a question to ask about the moon is, do I feel connected to my body? Am I in touch with my feelings? Am I at peace with my feelings? Do I have a good relationship with my feelings? Another really important dimension of the moon is all of the work that has to do with the inner child and learning how to have a good relationship with the young, vulnerable, childlike part of us that has particular needs and particular wounds from the past, and developing and cultivating ultimately a really good capacity to have a good parent, a good parent part of ourselves that relates to the inner child in a positive, forgiving, self-loving way. We need to be able to reassure and comfort the young, vulnerable part of ourselves and demonstrate to that part of ourselves that we're good at taking care of ourselves. And so there are certain lunar combinations, like the moon with Saturn. That combination, one of the 45 combinations that I mentioned in the initial video, the moon-Saturn archetype is a place in every human psyche where we have, on the one hand, experience of abandonment. Saturn can block and frustrate and negate and bring challenges. And the moon is our emotional needs for caring, support. And so with the moon Saturn, it's the ways in which we haven't felt cared for. And sometimes where we can be stuck in a kind of abandoned child, orphan orientation to the world, where we feel a kind of expectation that we're not going to get our needs met. This is what I would call poverty consciousness. And yet that poverty consciousness can transform towards the positive moon-Saturn archetype, which is the grandmother or grandfather archetype. The grandmother who's learned slowly over time, over many years, how to take good care of herself and how to be a nurturing, responsible, caring presence in others' lives. And ultimately, it's our own capacity to find the inner grandmother, the inner wise, feminine, caring force that can be responsible and committed. Moon Saturn can be the negative parent, the abandoning parent, but it can also, in the positive sense, be the responsible, dutiful, mature parent. And so the Moon Saturn work and a dimension of moon work generally is learning to find that wise, responsible caretaker and show up and be responsible for our own emotional needs and not abandon ourselves. And so this is some of the work that's really important with the moon. Any kind of emotional self-exploration is an honoring of the moon. Anytime we put the focus on our home and creating a kind of nurturing, comfortable home life for ourselves, anytime we're honoring our relationships with family, but the moon has to do with relationality generally. And so whenever we're honoring the fact that we are relational beings and consider the other, consider our relationships, this is an honoring of the moon. Whenever we're thinking more of our bodies and being caring towards our bodies and the food and nourishment that our bodies need, that's honoring the moon. Sometimes we're so solar and so oriented towards our creative lives, so focused on shining in the world, we get self-obsessed to a degree that we forget about our bodies and the need to nourish them and provide the nutrients that we need. And so the moon has a lot to do with food and diet and how we care for ourselves with food. And it has a lot to do in the shadow sense with different kinds of food issues, eating disorders and so forth. Problematic moon, shadow moon areas can be things like when we get overwhelmed by the wounded child, when we make decisions from the hurt child place within ourselves and act childlike as opposed to acting like a mature, responsible adult. And so for me, the moon, as I've been discussing, it has a lot to do with how we relate to our inner child. I think we all have to learn to be loving and accepting of the inner child, but we also have to learn how to not let the inner child, especially the hurt inner child, make all our decisions. We don't make wise decisions from the hurt child place. We make wise decisions from an adult place that is in relationship to the child, where the adult considers and cares for the child, but doesn't let the child make the choices that only an adult knows how to make. So those are some initial thoughts on the moon. Is there anything else I want to say here? I mean, we could obviously go on and on. I think we're tuned into the moon when we know how to ask for help, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and reach out to others to support us on our journey. And I think that's a big cutting edge with the moon. And so ask yourself, how good am I at asking for help? That'll tell you how well integrated the moon channel is in your psyche. All right, so thank you.